You probably think of history's great trade routes as these epic adventures. Camel caravans in the sunset, ships loaded with treasure. It's a cool image, thanks to movies. But you need to forget everything you've seen in the movies. For the people who actually traveled them, these routes weren't paths to fortune. They were graveyards. These roads were defined less by the riches they carried and more by the insane number of lives they claimed. They were carved through the world's most hostile landscapes, patrolled by ruthless bandits, and haunted by invisible killers that could wipe out a whole crew in a week. This is the story of the deadliest journeys in history, and how the few who survived them didn't just get rich. They literally built the world we know today. First off, the name the Silk Road is a total lie. It was never a single road. It was a terrifying, sprawling 6,400-kilometer web of interconnected trails and mountain passes. It wasn't a highway. It was a continent-spanning obstacle course connecting China's Han Dynasty with the markets of the Roman Empire. And the prize was unbelievable. From the east came stuff that seemed like magic to the west. Silk was the headliner, so fine it was like woven moonlight. Roman aristocrats were obsessed and paid insane prices for it, with some complaining that the empire's gold was draining away for the luxury fabric. But there was more. Porcelain, spices like cinnamon and ginger, and world-changing tech like gunpowder and paper. Heading the other way from west to east was gold, silver, glassware, and the powerful horses Chinese emperors desperately needed for their cavalry. With stakes this high, the journey was guaranteed to be brutal. The first filter was the terrain. After leaving China, a merchant's first real test was the Taklamakan Desert. In the local language, its name means, "You will go in, but you will not come out." And that wasn't an exaggeration. This was a barren wasteland of boiling heat in the summer and freezing cold in the winter. But the real killer wasn't just thirst, it was the wind. The caravan, or black hurricane, could appear out of nowhere, a terrifying wall of black dust and sand that blotted out the sun. These storms could literally bury entire caravans in minutes. Archaeologists have found lost cities along the route, perfectly preserved under tons of sand. The desert was also a place of ghosts. Exhausted, dehydrated travelers would see shimmering lakes and cities that weren't there, mirages that would trick them into walking off the path to their deaths. The route was marked not by signposts, but by the sun-bleached bones of people and animals who made one wrong move. If you were lucky enough to survive the desert, you got to face the Pamir Mountains, a range known as the roof of the world. Here, the danger wasn't heat. It was a lack of air. Altitude sickness would hit you with pounding headaches and a weakness so bad you couldn't even stand. The paths were terrifyingly narrow, clinging to the side of a cliff with a 1,000-foot drop straight down. One slip by a camel, and a fortune in goods, and the people with it, would plummet into the abyss. Yet, the mountains and deserts were predictable. The most unpredictable danger was other people. The route was way too long for any empire to police. Large stretches were lawless, controlled by nomadic horsemen and bandit tribes. To them, a caravan wasn't global trade. It was a giant, slow-moving loot box. Merchants learned to travel in huge convoys with armed guards, but even that wasn't a guarantee. A well-planned ambush in a narrow pass could be a total massacre. And then there was the killer you couldn't see, fight, or bribe. The Silk Road was also the world's first intercontinental superhighway for disease. Fleas on rats, germs on travelers, they all moved along this network. The Black Death, which devastated Europe, almost certainly traveled along these very routes. A merchant could survive bandits and blizzards, only to die from a fever in a roadside inn, thousands of miles from home. The few who completed the entire journey were absolute legends. They weren't just merchants, they were survivors, diplomats, and fighters. And their impact was massive. They didn't just move goods, they cross-pollinated the entire world. Chinese papermaking traveled west, helping kickstart the European Renaissance. Buddhist art from India made its way to China. The world was being woven together, one deadly journey at a time, by a handful of people brave or desperate enough to risk it all. South of the Silk Road, another route clawed its way through an even more punishing landscape. This was the Tea Horse Road. For over 1,000 years, this 6,000-mile network connected China's tea-growing regions with the high plateaus of Tibet. It was a vertical nightmare that made the Silk Road's mountains look like a walk in the park. The trade was born from pure necessity. China had tons of tea but desperately needed strong war horses. Tibet had incredible horses but a nutrient-poor diet. Tea gave them essential vitamins and helped them digest their high-fat meals. So, they struck a bargain. Bricks of Chinese tea for powerful Tibetan horses. It sounds simple until you see the terrain. The route cuts straight through the Hengduan Mountains, home to some of the deepest river gorges on the planet. This wasn't just crossing one mountain range, it was crossing them over and over again. The traders here weren't rich merchants. Most were porters, men who carried staggering loads on their own backs. A single porter could be carrying anywhere from 60 to 90 kilograms of tea. That's like carrying another person. Their days were a grueling rhythm of walking and resting, step after agonizing step. The paths themselves were just a list of ways to die. They were often narrow ledges hacked into a cliff, with a river roaring thousands of feet below. In some places, they built plank roads, rickety wooden walkways bolted directly into the rock face. Walking on these with a heavy load, in high winds or freezing rain, was pure terror. One rotten plank, and you were gone. River crossings were another nightmare. During monsoon season, the rivers became raging torrents. The solution was often a rope bridge, sometimes just a single thick strand of bamboo. Traders would have to shimmy across, hand over hand, with their cargo strapped to their backs. Landslides were a daily threat. The whole region is incredibly unstable, and heavy rains could turn a mountainside into a river of mud and rock, burying an entire caravan in an instant. The work was so dangerous that the porters had their own songs to keep rhythm and stay sane. The journey took months. Many who set out just never came back. They fell from cliffs, were swept away by rivers, or died of exhaustion. And yet, this brutal trade lasted for over 1,000 years because it was a lifeline. Incredibly, during World War II, when Japan blocked other supply routes, this ancient path was brought back to life as a secret backup route to sneak essential goods into China, a final testament to its rugged importance. This is insane, right? If you're finding these stories of survival as fascinating as I do me a huge favor and smash that like and subscribe button. It literally takes a second and helps us explore even more of history's forgotten paths. Okay, back to the perils of the past. All right, let's go from freezing mountains to a desert so hot it's nicknamed the Empty Quarter in Arabia. Here, a different treasure fueled one of the ancient world's most dangerous trades, the incense route. The treasures weren't silk or horses, but scents. Specifically, frankincense and myrrh. To us, it might just be a nice smell. But to the ancient world, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, this stuff was everything. It was burned in temples to honor the gods, used in mummification, and was a powerful medicine. At its peak, some frankincense was worth more than its weight in gold. And it only grew in one place on Earth, the remote valleys of southern Arabia. Getting this sacred scent to the Mediterranean was a 2,000-mile epic. The journey was dominated by the camel, the only animal that could survive it. Caravans could be massive, sometimes with over 2,000 camels, a slow-moving city crawling across the sand under a sun that could hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Water was more valuable than the incense itself. The entire route was a dot-to-dot of wells and oases. If a well had run dry or your water skin leaked, your whole crew was dead. Dehydration was a slow, agonizing death. And just like in the Taklamakan, travelers hallucinated. They spoke of jinn, or desert spirits, that would howl in the wind and use mirages to lure them off the path to die. But the natural dangers were matched by the human ones. The route passed through the territories of numerous Bedouin tribes. These guys were masters of the desert and viewed the caravans as a payday. A smart caravan master didn't fight them. The journey was a long, expensive process of paying taxes. At the edge of each tribe's territory, you paid a tribute for safe passage. If you refused, they'd raid you, and you'd lose everything. It was basically a protection racket on a massive scale. On top of that, powerful kingdoms grew rich by controlling the route. The Nabateans, who built the incredible rock-carved city of Petra, became masters of this. Their capital was a mandatory stop where they charged insane taxes and sold supplies at huge markups. The stunning city of Petra was built entirely on these profits. Surviving the incense route required an iron will, expert navigation by the stars, and the negotiating skills of a king. The reward was immense. These desert traders didn't just move incense, they funded entire civilizations that rose from the sand. For all the horrors on land, you might think the sea was safer. You'd be dead wrong. The Mediterranean, the heart of the classical world, was not a paradise. It was a volatile, unpredictable graveyard. For the Greeks, Romans, and Egyptians, it was their primary highway. The goods moved across the Med were the foundations of civilization. Grain from Egypt fed Rome. Without those ships, the city would starve. Olive oil, wine, and metals for tools and weapons all traveled by sea. Most importantly, it carried people and ideas. This is how Greek philosophy spread, how Roman legions deployed, and how a new religion called Christianity traveled from Judea to conquer the empire. But every voyage was a gamble. The biggest danger was the weather. Ancient ships were basically wooden tubs with one big square sail. They couldn't sail against the wind, forcing them to wait in port for weeks for the right conditions. Being caught in a storm was the ultimate nightmare. Waves the size of buildings could crash over the ship and sink it in minutes. Ancient sailors had no weather forecasting, only experience and prayers to the gods. The bottom of the Mediterranean is a giant junkyard of shipwrecks, each one a time capsule of disaster. If the weather didn't get you, pirates might. Piracy was a massive problem. From the Illyrians to the infamous Cilician pirates, these raiders were a constant threat. They'd dart out from hidden coves and fast ships, swarm a slower merchant vessel, kill anyone who resisted, and sell the rest of the crew and passengers into slavery. Piracy got so bad it almost starved the city of Rome before the military general Pompey the Great was sent in to wage a full-scale war against them. Even navigation was a nightmare. They had no GPS. They navigated by keeping land in sight. In the open ocean, they used the stars. But on a cloudy night, a ship was effectively blind. It was terrifyingly easy to get lost and drift for days until you ran out of food and water. The sea was the engine of the ancient world, but it ran on the lives of sailors who stared into the wine-dark graveyard and prayed it wouldn't be their turn. Our final journey takes us north, into the dark, cold forests of ancient Europe. This was the Amber Road, connecting the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. The prize here wasn't a spice or fabric, but the gold of the north, amber. Amber is fossilized tree resin. To the Romans who craved it, this stuff was magical. They carved it into jewelry and amulets, and doctors prescribed it for everything from fever to insanity. Pliny the Elder wrote that a small amber figurine could be worth more than a healthy slave. This insane demand created a trade route that stretched for thousands of miles through what the Romans considered total wilderness. This road wasn't about one single obstacle. Its deadliness was a slow burn, a non-stop gauntlet of misery. For much of the year, the region was locked in a brutal winter. Rivers froze, snow buried the trails, and the cold was a constant threat. Get lost or injured, and you'd simply freeze to death. The vast, dark forests were home to wolves and bears, but the real danger was getting disoriented and lost. The human element was just as dangerous. The route passed through the lands of dozens of different, often warring, Germanic, Baltic, and Celtic tribes. There was no central authority. A trader had to be a master negotiator, bribing every local chieftain with gifts. One wrong move, one perceived insult, and your entire caravan could be attacked and seized. Later, a new danger emerged: the Teutonic Knights. These were crusading holy warriors who decided to conquer the pagan lands of the Baltic. Their mission was to convert the locals, but it was really about seizing control of the region's wealth, especially the amber trade. The knights didn't negotiate, they subjugated. They built massive brick castles, turning trading posts into military fortresses. Trade became inseparable from war. A merchant was now caught in the crossfire between tribal ambushes and a full-blown holy war. The Amber Road was a different kind of deadly. Its dangers were colder and darker, but it was one of the first arteries to connect the civilized Mediterranean with the barbarian north, funneling Roman wealth into Europe and laying the first foundations of the world we know. The Silk Road, the Tea-Horse Road, the Incense Route. These weren't trade routes. They were death wishes. The men and women who traveled these paths were not just merchants. They were ultimate survivors in a daily battle against the planet and the worst of human nature. They faced death from thirst, falls, disease, and violence. The vast majority who set out probably never made it back. But the few who survived did more than just deliver their cargo. They stitched the world together. They were the conduits for ideas, technologies, and cultures. These connections, forged in danger, are the bedrock of our modern world.